Hey, it's Rebecca Simon Peter with three big skills every small church pastor needs to know. Before I started this ministry, I pastored for years in small town, rural, isolated, gorgeous Wyoming. And when I say isolated, I mean isolated. It was 100 miles to the next biggest town in any direction. 100 miles. It was an hour and a half. And ministry in small towns, isolated settings, rural settings requires a very special skill set. The congregations tend to be family sized, they've got a long history, but they have a shrinking impact. And at the same time, the role that these really important congregations occupy is more important than ever, especially in light of the pandemic. So today I'm going to zero in on three big skills that every small church pastor needs to know, plus the number one trap you've got to avoid in order to be an effective pastor. So, small town, small church ministry has its abundant share of joys and its abundant share of challenges. So, let's talk about some of the joys first. I mean, here's what I found, and I'd love to know what you found. Put it in the chat, comment on that. We'll check it out. But folks are committed. They are committed to the life of the church. A lot of times it's the church they grew up in. Their parents were a part of it. Their grandparents were a part of it. Maybe they want their grandkids buried there. They are committed to the life of the church. They don't put on pretenses. What you see is what you get. And these are resilient people, really resilient people. They know how to get through crop failures. They know how to get through dramatic weather events. They know how to get through the ups and downs of rural life, of small town life. But there are also challenges. So let's talk about some of those challenges. So smaller congregations have outsized needs. They have big needs, bigger needs than you would expect based on the size. So why? A lot of those communities are changing. They're changing because economics are changing, immigration is changing, demographics are changing, and age demographics are changing. So, what that probably means is that they are poorer, they are more diverse, and they are less able to reach out to the young people and to the young families than they need to be. That's a heck of a stew pot to find yourself in. Poor, more diverse, and less able to reach out to the young people and young families that they really need to. And at the same time, a resilient congregational culture can often mean that they resist change. So the other thing is they often cannot afford a full-time pastor. So it's harder for them to steer the congregation in a new direction. These are hard to solve challenges, and they can set you, the small church pastor or the rural church pastor, they can set you up for a trap. So here's the number one trap you have to avoid. I call this the give more time trap. Can you say that with me? The give more time trap. This is the number one trap of part-time and bivocational pastors. It's the belief that if you really cared or if you were really called by God, you would do it all. You would attend every meeting. You would visit every single sick person. You would go to every event, every community function. You would make every pastoral call possible. You would attend every service organization meeting. Are you getting the insanity of this? And that somehow through sheer force of will, you would be able to solve the community's problems. Now, how do I know that so well? I fell into that trap. I fell into it. But this trap is so pernicious because not only do we fall prey to that, they fall prey to that. And the other side of the trap is that if you don't do it all, somehow you're not a good pastor, or you're not really called, or you don't really love them. But both of these are lies. One, that you can solve the community's problems if you just give it enough time. And that if you don't give it every single thing way above and beyond what you're called to, that you're a bad pastor. These are lies. Repeat that after me. These are lies. Don't fall prey to the give more time trap. Don't. Jesus didn't. He did not. He did not. And we should not either, because buying into it sets you up. What does it set you up for? Well, let's see: resentment, overwork, burnout, alienation from your family, disconnect from your soul, poor health, and loss of faith. Loss of faith. Plus, if you do manage to give it all, even if you don't accomplish everything you want to, it's a terrible precedent for the next person who follows you. Please don't do it. It's not good for anybody because it's not sustainable. So these are not good outcomes, right? Burnout, loss of faith, loss of health. They're not good outcomes for you. They're not good for the congregation, and they are not good for the community. So forget about being a time warper. That is not what we're talking about here. Instead, I want you to focus on the big three skills. Okay, so that's what we're here to talk about. Three big skills for small church pastors. The first skill is lead from the middle. Lead from the middle. There are three positions you could lead from. You can lead from behind, you could lead from out front, or you could lead from the middle. Now, leading from out front only way people and they may never catch up with you. Leading from behind means that you may be more risk averse than they are and you're a little too hands off. But if you lead from the middle, it means that you can actually be with the people, discern their natural pace of decision making, discern the dynamics that happen. And then I'd say just speed up things like one or two notches. So you're going a little bit faster than them so that you can keep things moving and they don't get bogged down and you don't get bogged down there by their pace. Uh, but lead from the middle plus a notch or two. Now, when you lead from the middle and finding their natural pace of decision making, I liken that to driving 5 to 7 miles over the speed limit. You're not under, you're not 10 miles over, you're not going to be pulled over, right? But just 5 to 7 miles over the speed limit gives you a little bit of an advantage in terms of leading and to help steer while you're working with your people. And a great way to do this is to form a Bible study with some of your key leaders. And it could be online, it could be in person, it could be hybrid, but it gives you these natural points of contact throughout the week, throughout the month to meet with the key people, the stakeholders, the people who are really the leaders of the congregation. So that's one, lead from the middle. Second of the three big skills for small church pastors is to train and empower. You're not going to be there forever. You can't do it all, especially if you're part time or bivocational. You have to figure out the wisest way to use your time. And I think a close study of the life and the ministry of Jesus shows he didn't try to do it all. You count how many times he's off talking to God and people are looking for him and they're out, on the wind and the waves and like, where's Jesus? Did you also notice how many times he sends out 12 or 72 to go ahead of him, carry the good news, heal people, cast out demons, do the work, like the stuff we think only Jesus could do? He actually had his people doing it. Why? Because he trained and he empowered them ahead of time, and thus he could send them out. So I think that it's really important to emulate Jesus when you're in small church ministry because you're not going to be there forever. But when you can train people to preach, you can train people to pray, you can train people to teach and exegete the scriptures and lead meetings, then you can empower them. While you're empowering them, you're still there to coach them and encourage them. That's your job in small church ministry, is to build up the people so that they can lead, especially if the congregation is already half time. Don't try to do it all. Instead, train and empower them. All right. Third of the three big skills for small church pastors is be community minded. In small towns and in rural settings, the congregation is the community, and the community is the congregation. You know that if you've been performing funerals, you are probably the pastor of choice for the funerals in town, whether or not those folks belong in your congregation. The congregation is the community, and the community is the congregation. So when you show up at community events, you are demonstrating your love, you're demonstrating your interest in tangible ways, and you're demonstrating the love of God in tangible ways. Now, you don't have to serve on Rotary and volunteer to be the police chaplain and attend all the hometown sports. That's sort of trying to do everything again. But do find ways to be present in the lives of children and young people. Think about it. When you're present in the lives of children and young people, you have an impact not only on their direct life, but their circle of friends, and then all the way up, parents, grandparents, aunts, and uncles. That positively impacts everybody, and you positively impact the institutions that those young people are a part of. And I think this is the best way to really have the biggest impact. You're training and empowering your laity, and you're spending time with the children and the youth. In these days, offering grief support, offering mental health support, super important. In fact, you may be the most trained professional in your community and the one that's most equipped to offer these really important services, especially now. Young people, children, they haven't been through something like this before. They don't know there's life after a pandemic. We who are a little bit older, we know this too shall pass. Bringing that resilience, bringing that hope, bringing that love is so very important. All right. Every ministry setting has its joys and its challenges, and every small church has its joys and challenges. The same is going to be true for you. You're going to find things you absolutely love about it. You're going to find things that are really frustrating for you. But when you embrace those three big skills for small church pastors, you will find more joy than challenge because you'll navigate. You'll be able to really right size what your impact, where you're going to have an impact, how much time you're spending, and most important of all, be sure to work on your own spiritual connection with God because you can't lead people where you can't go. Think about how often Jesus went off to be with God so he could be refueled for the adventure. And he only had 12 people he was leading. So if we have more than 12, we need that more than ever. Hey, folks, great to be with you. I look forward to being with you next week. I'm doing a whole series on rural ministry, bivocational ministry, how small churches can be coping during the pandemic. So join me next week. I think it's at the same time or close to it. And I'll look forward to seeing you then for Leadership Mojo. Thanks a lot. Take good care. God loves you. And so do I. See you next time.